Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well. In today's video, I'm going to talk about tax compliance in South Africa and specifically the requirements for valid tax invoices. I think there is a lot to say about the requirements for valid tax invoices. They are important because if you don't meet all the requirements, then you may not be able to claim the input VAT that you would want to claim. So let's get into it. In South Africa, we have a value added tax system, a VAT system. Businesses who are vendors who are registered for VAT are allowed to deduct VAT incurred on business expenses, input tax, from the VAT charged output tax on the suppliers of goods and services by businesses. To make this more simpler, if you're a vendor, it means that you're a business who is registered for VAT. You then deliver goods and services for a consideration. To be able to do that, you have to go and buy products from suppliers or maybe you render services. If you do so, you pay those suppliers and sometimes you have to pay VAT on those suppliers you pay. So if you pay VAT, that means you have paid input VAT and then you may be able to claim that input VAT back when you actually go and charge for your services, and then in that way you can offset the input VAT that you paid from the output that you will charge. So that is the goal. The most important document will be the valid tax invoice. For without the valid tax invoice, a business cannot deduct the input tax on business expenses. So what we can see is that it is a risk if you have a tax invoice, but it does not meet all the requirements for tax invoices. The VAT Act prescribes the following. A tax invoice must contain details about the taxable supply made by the business as well as the parties to the transaction. A business is required to issue a tax invoice to its client within 21 days from the time the supply was made. A business is also required to issue a tax invoice if the price is more than 5,000 Rand, referred to as a consideration for a supply, and may then issue an abridged tax invoice if the consideration is less than 5,000 Rand. So what is important to see here is that there is a distinction between a supply that is more than 5,000 Rand and a supply that is less than 5,000 Rand. The VAT Act further prescribes that if the consideration for a supply is 50 Rand or less, a tax invoice is not required. However, a document such as a sale docket or a till slip indicating the VAT charged by the supplier is required to verify the input tax deducted. For example, if you go to a builder's warehouse and you buy stuff for your business there, you're not going to give your full details to the person at the till. If it's under 5,000 Rand, you're basically just going to pay for your goods and receive a till slip that shows the items that you bought. It will also contain the details of builder's warehouse on the invoice, but not necessarily your business details. So from the 8th of January 2016, the following information must be reflected on a tax invoice. The words tax invoice, VAT invoice or invoice, the name, address and VAT registration number of the supplier, that's the person selling the goods or the services, the name, address and where the recipient is a vendor, the recipient's VAT registration number, so that is your customer's details. Then also a serial number. So what's a serial number? It's the invoice number that's on the tax invoice, and it's important that you have a unique invoice number for every invoice that you issue to your clients, and also the date of the issuance of the invoice, so the date on which you delivered the invoice to the client. Then also an accurate description of the goods and services. You also need to indicate if goods are second-hand goods. That is an important distinction to make. And then also the quantity or volume of the goods and the services supplied, as well as the value of the supply, the amount of the tax charge, and the consideration of the supply. So the value of the supply is the excluding VAT amount. The amount of tax charge will be your VAT at 15% or your VAT at the 0 rate. And then the consideration will be the including VAT amount. I've then compiled this checklist that you can use to see if you have a full tax invoice, what are the requirements that need to be met. And this is where the supply including VAT exceeds 5,000 Rand, then all 7 these criteria must be met. So it contains the words tax invoice, VAT invoice, or invoice, then you can tick it yes or no. So this slide you can use if you're looking at an invoice and you want to confirm, if all the requirements are on the invoice you received from a supplier so that you will be able to claim the VAT. So is the name, address, and VAT registration number of the supplier on? Yes or no. Is the name, address, and where the recipient is a vendor displayed? Yes or no. Is the serial number and the date of issuance shown? Yes or no. Is there an accurate description of the goods and the services indicating where applicable that goods are second-hand goods? Is the quantity or volume of the goods or services supplied? Yes or no. And is the value of the supply, the amount of tax charge, and the consideration of the supply shown? Yes or no. So this slide is specifically for full tax invoices where the supply including VAT exceeds 5,000 Rand. We will now look at the case where the supply is less than 5,000 Rand. So now we look at abridged tax invoices. So a abridged tax invoice is where the value of the supply is more than 50 Rand but less than 5,000 Rand. For these abridged tax invoices, the amount of requirements goes from 7 to 5. So there's a few lesser details that need to be on the invoice. So the words tax invoice, VAT invoice, or invoice need to be shown. The name, address, and VAT registration number of the supplier. The serial number and date of issuance of the invoice. An accurate description of the goods or services indicating where applicable that the goods are second-hand goods, the value of the supply, the amount of tax charge, and the consideration of the supply. So what we can see falls away here is that the customer's details do not necessarily appear on the abridged tax invoice, and this comes back to the example I used for a builder's warehouse slip. If you bought goods or services that are less than 5,000 Rand. I then want to go through an example with you just to show you how this looks practically. So in this example, we are looking at a tax invoice. So we want to see the words tax invoice in a prominent place on the document. We also want to see that there is a unique serial number. So that is the invoice number. We then want to see the name, address, and recipient's VAT registration number. So it's billed to Best Coffee in Stellenbosch, 25 down the street, Stellenbosch. The code is 7600, as well as the VAT number of the customer. We want to see the date of the supply, which is the 23rd of July 2023, the date the invoice was issued, and then also who issued the invoice. In other words, who made out the invoice. It's the name, address, and VAT registration number of the supplier. We then also want to see an accurate description of the goods or services. In this example, it's the different kind of coffees, beans that are supplied, as well as the volume of the goods or services. We can see that there's a quantity of 10 of each kind of coffee that is being supplied. And then we want to look at what is the value of the supply, the amount of the tax charge, and the consideration of the supply. So here we can see the excluding VAT amount is 7,000 Rand. We can see that the VAT amount is 15% and that the including VAT amount works out to 8,050 Rand. Also important, this is not part of the VAT requirements, but you want to clearly show your banking details to your customer, the person who's making who's paying you, You want to give them your contact details like an email or a telephone account. You want to ask them, what reference number to use, or show them what reference number to use. And you also want to give them an indication of your payment terms. I've then come to the end of this presentation. I trust you find the presentation useful. If so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and also click the notification bell and share this video. You can also look at my YouTube channel. I have a lot of other relevant tax videos on there. And if you want to go and look at my LinkedIn, you're welcome to follow that link. For now, I thank you for watching this video and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.